In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul deals with qualities and characteristics that really need to be indicative of the life of the Christian, but also points out some shortcomings in certain ways that people take a look at things in culture, not just the first century, but even the 21st century. The first 8 verses read this way, and I'm reading out of the New Revised Standard Version. I like the way that it's translated the Greek text. You yourselves know, brothers and sisters, that our coming to you was not in vain, but though we had already suffered and been shamefully mistreated at Philippi, as you know, we had courage in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in spite of great opposition. Now, 2 things to note in verse 1 and verse 2. First of all, we faced a lot of difficulties. Some of those were horrendous. Being imprisoned, being beaten, being ridiculed, actually kind of being driven out of town. Difficulties that we faced did not stop us, point number 2, from declaring the gospel to you, from declaring the message of God to you, from talking about those principles that really need to be the innate quality of the human soul, the human psyche, the human spirit. Culture actually had thrown a lot of problems into the mix in that first century, just like our culture has today. Difficulties we faced, but we continued to declare that gospel. We were not going to stop. At verse number 3, our appeal does not spring from deceit or impure motives or trickery. And the third point, our appeal to you in the sharing of the message was from honesty, not from deceit. We believe the message. That's why we share it. And the way that that message is proclaimed and the opposition we have received and the way that individuals have tried to debate those topics but have failed actually strengthens the belief and the resolve that we possess in that message. We face difficulties. We declare the message no matter what those difficulties were. And we were working from honesty, not from deceit. Verse number 4. Just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the message of the gospel, even so we speak, not to please mortals, not as pleasing men. Not to please mortals, but to please God who tests our hearts. We're not here to say things that you already agree with, that fit culture in which you live. We're not here to compromise a message. We're not here to tell you that no matter what it was in which you were engaged, you get a participation trophy and everything's fine. You don't need to change anything about your life. We're not going to actually coddle to the wishes of people when we see glaring inconsistencies, irrationalities, and a lack of logic in the way they approach life. We face difficulties. We'll still declare the message. We're devoted to the truth that we find therein. In verse number 4, we are approved by God and be entrusted with the gospel. We're not looking for your approval. We're looking for your recognition of what is true and what kind of principles need to be followed. In the next place, verses 5, 6, and 7. You know, and as God is our witness, we never came with words of flattery or with a pretext for greed, nor did we seek praise from mortals, whether from you or from others. In verse 7 he writes this, we were gentle among you like a nurse tenderly caring for her own children. What's the point? Verses 5, 6, and 7. We are driven not just by the truth of God's word, but by our care for others. There were problems in that culture in the first century. In fact, in a lot of ways, the 21st century kind of mirrors the lack of consistency that you find in that golden age of the Roman Empire. The atrocities that were committed. The way that people were thinking, which really was often marked by greed. And you see that in our day, in all sorts of areas of our culture. And the statement that he makes in this verse is we're driven by our care for others not to be accepted and compromise our message for others. That really shows a lack of care and concern for others. And then in verse 8, so deeply do we care for you that we are determined to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you have become very dear to us. We're determined not just to share a message, but to share our life. Christianity flourished in a culture that basically worshipped everything and anything. A culture that actually was absorbed with greed and with power. Kind of sounds in some ways like our culture today. Christianity flourished then, and it can flourish, should flourish now. Why? The message hasn't changed. How can it flourish? Same kind of ways. You face difficulties, you keep proclaiming the message. You proclaim that message not out of any kind of flattery or selfish intent or greed. You're concerned for following principles that are eternal in focus, not temporary. You're not acquiescing to the mindset of a culture that shows itself more flawed almost at every turn with the passing of every year. We need to have the same kind of determination that Paul had in writing to these Christians. Be strong in the faith, recognize the message. Don't shy away from discussion. Now there will be a time when individuals that just kind of want to discuss without any kind of cognizance of the concept that they may be approaching things in an illogical way. Finally you have to move on. Some people are so stubborn that they can't accept truth when it stares them in the face. Love them anyway. Pray for them anyway. Share the message of God anyway. Face difficulties anyway. Serve God anyway. And make this world a better place. Not because of what you have invented, but because you've shared what God's Word has stated. If you're in the Oklahoma City area at all this weekend or any weekend, we'd like to invite you to come worship with us at the Cherokee Hills Church of Christ. We're located in Oklahoma City on Northwest 63rd Street, very close to Wiley Post Airport. We have Bible classes at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning and worship at 10. We'd love to have you be here. Please stay safe, no matter what. We'll talk again soon.